Chapter 4. Practice Makes Perfect. This proverb was first used in the English language between 1500 and 1560. The original saying was "use makes perfect," coined from the Latin version "usus promptus facit." The English version was first documented in the U.S. in the Diary and Autobiography of John Adams by Gregory Y. Titleman. In order to be good at anything we do, repetition is key. Anyone who has ever mastered anything that they love doing did not master it in a day. They did it over and over again and probably failed a few times. There are no cutting corners here. To master anything takes time and repetition. The 4 levels of competence. In his book, Psycho-Cybernetics, Dr. Maxwell Maltz talks about 4 levels of competence. Number 1, unconscious incompetence. The individual is completely unaware of what he doesn't know. He has not discovered his ability to accomplish certain tasks. His incompetence is related to the fact that he is unaware. Number 2, conscious incompetence. The individual has become aware of what he doesn't know. He is now conscious of his inability to do a certain task. For example, a kid realizing he can't ride a bike, or someone realizing that he or she can't swim. Number 3, conscious competence. At this level, the individual has learned to do what he previously could not do, but still has to consciously think of every action concerning the task. When I first started learning the German language, I often had to consciously think of my sentences and even words, wondering if what I said made sense. I had already learned the language, but conscious effort was still necessary. 4. Unconscious competence. This is a level of complete mastery. The individual has mastered doing certain tasks and does them subconsciously. For example, an experienced piano player does not have to think of which keys to play anymore. To reach the 4th level, one has to have not only knowledge or talent, but to practice over and over until one's brain automates it. David Beckham, the legendary English soccer player, was well known for his free kicks, which often led to great goals for the clubs he played for, and for the English national team. When David was on training with his teammates, he often remained on the pitch after the end of the training session to practice a couple of free kicks. He did that quite regularly, and his efforts paid off on the field and many times led to his team's victory. Lang Lang, the famous Chinese piano virtuoso, is known to practice several hours every day, even though he is already considered to be one of the best in the world. It is no wonder he has mastered his craft so well. The 10,000-hour rule. Malcolm Gladwell, in his book Outliers, talks about the 10,000-hour rule. To master your craft, you need to deliberately practice on average for 10,000 hours. Of course, one may argue about the exact number of hours, but the main message here is that it takes time and deliberate practice to be good at most of the things we do. This does not mean, of course, that talent does not matter. I know for sure that if I practice sprinting for 10,000 hours, I will not become Usain Bolt. Neither would mere practicing for the same amount of time on a piano make me Lang Lang, a noted Chinese concert pianist. The simple reason being I do not have talent in these areas. They both had the talent, or at least the rudiments of it, but what made them master their craft was repetition over a long period of time. The multitasking fallacy versus the power of focus. Multitasking, viewed by many as the great method in saving time, money, and increasing productivity, has its shortcomings. In some cases, multitasking does make sense. For example, doing the dishes and listening to a good audiobook, or changing the tires while listening to the radio or to some good music. The question is not whether multitasking is possible. It is. However, what is not possible is to multifocus. The human brain can only focus on one thing at a time. Yes, several things can be done at the same time, but they can never be done as effectively as when they are focused on exclusively. If you think of most of the world-renowned successful men and women, their names are immediately associated with a particular field of expertise that they are focused on. Bill Gates, personal computers; Henry Ford, automobiles; Michael Jordan, basketball; Nelson Mandela, politics, William Shakespeare, writing, Mark Zuckerberg, social networking, Mother Teresa, mission to the poor, J.K. Rowling, writing. There are, of course, many examples, but what they all have in common is the focus they had on their different fields. Anyone can quickly associate their names with their field of focus. This was achieved through years of practice and perfection. I once heard a friend argue in favor of multitasking by pointing out the fact that Michael Jordan was not just a basketball player, but also a businessman. He went on to list all the businesses in which Michael Jordan is involved. What he did not realize was that for many years, all that Michael Jordan did was play basketball. He was completely focused, and that is why he was as good as he was. He made a lot of money during his career. After he retired, he could focus on his businesses. People make the mistake of looking at their role models and thinking they have done so many things and that maybe this should be emulated. What is mostly left out is the fact that they focused on one field till they were successful. The other areas of interest came later. Practice and confidence. There is no doubt that the more we practice, the better we get, and of course, the more we feel confident in what we are doing. We have less anxiety and make fewer mistakes. This confidence and less anxiety not only applies to us, but to those around us. I always feel less anxious when I sit on a plane and realize that the pilot has a bit of gray hair, which indicates to me that he already has many hours of flight experience and therefore not only knows what he is doing, but would probably also make the right decisions in case problems occurred. If you were about to be operated on and you found out that you were the surgeon's first patient ever, you would probably not feel as comfortable as if you were being operated on by an experienced surgeon. Deliberate practice for top performance. Repetitive practice is without a doubt very important in learning new skills or mastering old ones. However, mere repetition of the same procedures has one major disadvantage if you want to be at the top of your field. Plateau. For example, anyone can learn how to ride a bicycle through repetitive practice. But to master same skill to the point of being a competitor at a professional level, normal practice would not cut it. This is where deliberate practice comes in. Deliberate practice is not simply the act of training harder, but rather deliberately acknowledging the little nuances that you need to work on to get to the top, and then focusing your practice sessions on dealing with them. In a very competitive 100 meters race, the differences between first and second could be the quality of the first stride from the starting block. Good coaches deliberately work with their athletes on this act that may seem irrelevant to some. Those who do not know this may repeatedly focus only on the sprint while training. This, of course, makes them good runners, but they may not be among the top finishers. I personally experienced the difference between normal practice and deliberate practice while working out, one of my regular routines after waking up. I previously made the mistake of repeating the same workout regimen every session. Of course, my body did profit from that for a while because I could see the physical changes taking place. However, after some time, I hit a plateau and realized that my body had become used to the kind of exercises I was doing. From that point on, there were no more visible changes. This was, of course, very frustrating. And so, after some research and talking to friends who had a lot of knowledge in this field, I realized that I had to change my workout regimen. I included new exercises and increased the difficulty level of the older ones. After some time, my body responded, and I could see the difference again after a long plateau. I felt stronger, and my stamina had drastically improved. I clearly saw the results of deliberate practice. After mastery, be flexible and open-minded. Before the onset of the information age, most people learned a trade, got a job, mastered it, and basically did it their whole lives. In a lot of professions today, the mentality of doing something just like we have done it for years will not always work and can sometimes lead to great errors in judgment. Nokia was a giant in the production of cell phones when they first became popular. Everyone knew Nokia and lots of people wanted to buy their latest cell phones. The company was confident in the way they did things because they had done it for a long time and were profitable. When Steve Jobs and Apple announced that the first iPhone with touchscreen technology was out, many in the cell phone industry probably did not take them seriously. Today, iPhone not only dominates the market but has set the new standard on how smartphones are built. The German mail-order service giant Otto suffered the same fate as Nokia. Otto was Europe's biggest mail-order service company and very successful in their heyday. Most, if not all, households in Germany regularly got the catalogs from Otto with the different pictures and descriptions of products. They could choose what they want from the catalogs and order them per mail, and the company delivered. When online shopping started gaining ground, Otto ignored this new way of doing business, probably because they had perfected their old way of doing it and saw a need to change. It was a terrible mistake. Most of the younger generation in Germany and in Europe have never heard of Otto, but they all know Amazon. Up until 1998, most soccer teams in the world had a libero, the last defender before the goalkeeper, and 3 defenders in front of the libero. Germany became world champions in 1972 and 1990 using this system to organize their line of defense. As the game became faster and more physical, it became clear that to be successful, a team had to be dominant in the midfield. France was one of the countries that first realized this and put it into practice. They abandoned the libero system and changed to defending with 4 defenders on a chain, and therefore had the advantage of having one more player in the midfield. They became world champions in 1998 and were pioneers in the way most soccer teams organize their defense lines today. These examples, and there are many more, go to show that while it is good to master your trade through repetition, it is also equally important to be flexible and keep up with the times. In the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen R. Covey lists sharpening the saw as the 7th habit. He goes on to explain how important it is to update the knowledge of the trade you learned if you are to excel in your career in these modern times. Practice does indeed make perfect. Practicing over and over may sometimes even mean the difference between life and death. Professional fire brigades all over the world simulate emergencies and go through the drills over and over so that they would save lives in a real emergency situation. Members of the armed forces and law enforcement regularly do the same. Their preparedness depends on their regular practice. The proverb, "Practice makes perfect," is timeless. It was true when it was coined, and it is still true today.